I don't think I hate the law. So are there other ways to do law?
But then perspective and time, and then a year or two later, you're like, what? Why did I even think that that was okay?
I kind of want to try my hands at entrepreneurship. It was a period where I really felt like I was going crazy and destroying my career. With First Generation Purpose Project, it took off so quickly. I didn't even have an invoice system. Hey, Kyle.
Hi, it's you. How you doing?
I am doing okay. I have my dog like chilling here with me. I don't know if you've met my little pup, but
No.
You want to see him? Come here.
Yeah.
Come here, Casper. Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. So I work home a lot.
How are you?
For this very reason. All right. It's
Jasper.
Casper.
Is that
Casper,
right?
The friendly ghost.
Casper.
Yeah.
Casper, you gonna kick this episode off for us?
Yeah.
If you give me a treat.
Right? That part. All right. You can go back down now. Thank you.
Oh.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm a little sleepy today.
Me too.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the energy, or I came back from, I was in Tech Week all week in San Fran, and that one wore me out a little bit. I came back and I slept 12 hours the first night that I was home.
Yeah.
And then I was great yesterday. I was so much energy. And then, I don't know, maybe all my energy got used up yesterday.
No, I hear you. So it's San Francisco. Oh yeah, you were, okay, you were in San Francisco for Tech Week. I did San Francisco Tech Week as well. I went to a few events. And I think just like, as much as I love people, interacting with so much energy can definitely wear me out. So I think that like if your Tech Week was anything like mine, then, give yourself grace.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm an introvert at heart that has taught himself to be extroverted. And I do like being out and about and interacting with people, but I also it saps me sometimes. And then obviously a week of doing that. And, I had investor meetings and partner meetings, and I flew to New York, and we had a stack list on Times Square, and that was fun.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that was fun. But yeah, I think now I just need to sit and, I don't know, restart Ozark from scratch and watch it all and eat some popcorn and like get my brain back. I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's interesting because like in moments where our energy feels zapped, it's so easy to like want to get mad at ourselves and be like, I need to be productive. I need to do this. But we are, and I'm saying this to you as I'm saying it to myself, we are being productive by virtue of like sitting and getting our energy back. So I do hope that you are able to take some time to just recharge.
Yeah, I will. I'm definitely going to recharge. Well, thank you for joining today. I'm excited to hear the early stories of. So you and I met. I was referred to you by Kyle Westaway, who is our general counsel. And as we first started working on general counsel stuff together, we started talking about trademark and figuring out names, and that's where he was like, "Oh, I've got somebody you got to talk to." And so you and I were connected, and it's been fun, and I think I've enjoyed the process of learning about how to think about IP and trademark. So I'd love to get into Firm for the Culture at some point, but also maybe before that, it's just backing up to the early beginnings of your entrepreneurial, maybe out of school, or where it sort of started when you started. Did you come out of school going into doing your own thing, or did you come out of school sort of working somewhere?
Yeah, are we already started? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, let me just start off by just saying, Kyle, it's been such a great journey with you. I love how you're so eager to learn, and I love our conversations because our conversations almost always Like they start off with like me giving you trademark updates and all that great stuff, but they always, without exception, always kind of flow into just life and entrepreneurship and just, the challenges that we face and are overcoming. So when I heard about your podcast, I knew that this was going to be another great opportunity for a great conversation. Now, in terms of my journey, um, the way the reason why Kyle Westaway and I connected is because I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, in
Nice.
born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, first generation everything. Um, and then I graduated from UC Berkeley School of Law. And after I graduated, I didn't go into full time entrepreneurship. I wasn't even thinking about full time entrepreneurship. I was just trying to figure out how to survive as a first gen everything. So I came back to New York. I worked on Wall Street, essentially doing securities work and securities litigation. And I hated it. And I hated it for so.
That's fun. It's fun to find. It's not fun in the moment, but it's fun to find things that you definitely don't like.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily the subject matter, so to speak. I thought it was quite interesting. It was coming back to New York an entirely, completely different person than when I left New York, and not really being able to reconcile um, those somewhat conflicting identities. Like I left New York a girl from the projects of Brooklyn, New York. Like I left kind of, being in certain parts of the city and not necessarily having access to others. And then I came back with, brand shiny new degree, New York State bar licensed, talking to folks who thought it was a steal that they got shoes for like $350. And it was just like a real, and my past still existed in New York. My mom still lived where I grew up. Many people still grew up in my neighborhood. They were still there. So it was really a tough um, journey working to reconcile what seemed to be very, very conflicting and somewhat vacillating identities. So, and also at the same time, coming from Berkeley, where, it's very crunchy. Part of our
Yeah.
part of our uniform is pretty much Birkenstocks and Ray
From
Bans.
Birkenstocks to Wall Street?
Yeah,
Is that
like
the
exactly. Like part of our uniform is Birkenstocks, Ray Bans, maybe some shorts, and like a really cool like Berkeley law sweatshirt. So coming from pretty much 60 to 70-degree weather all the time to going back to New York in the midst of what was considered one of the coldest winters in their recent history, the polar vortex, and not being able to go outside as per, at the time, Mayor de Blasio's instructions. Like, I don't know if you remember that time or if you,
Yeah.
it was brutal. And I
Yep.
remember just thinking, I don't want to be here back in New York. So it was definitely a tough first year after graduating from Berkeley, and not really knowing the unwritten rules of the spaces I was navigating and the politics of corporate America just made it a really tough year. So after that, I did go back to California for a federal clerkship. And a federal clerkship, for the audience, is a really fancy way of saying I was a ghostwriter for an Obama appointed federal judge, which in the legal field is quite prestigious. So did that for a couple of years. Then after that, went to the Silicon Valley and worked at the top litigation firm in the country doing trademarks, patents, copyrights, trade secrets. And then it was after all of that that I then decided, okay, I kind of want to try my hand at entrepreneurship. Because when you're in a place like Silicon Valley, it's so easy to get the bug.
Yeah,
It's so easy.
exactly. And
So
that's where you really cut your teeth in, and I would imagine found that passion for trademark and IP, right? Was
yeah,
in Silicon Valley.
absolutely. Because there was so much creativity in that space. Like I was less than, 15 minutes away from Facebook. I lived less than 3 minutes away from Visa. I was surrounded by innovation. But at the same time, I was consistently hearing stories of founders who uh, got their intellectual property stolen. And they didn't really know what they didn't know about the value of their IP. And oftentimes, they didn't look like the faces of the founders in the Silicon Valley. They didn't look like, Mark Zuckerberg, or they didn't look like Elon Musk, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And because they weren't billion-dollar unicorn companies, stories around their intellectual property were virtually non-existent, if not uh, if not like just like downgraded or not considered valuable. So I knew that at the billable hourly rate that I was being charged out as, like $700 an hour, I couldn't even afford myself, frankly. I knew that I wanted to make IP law a little bit more accessible, a little bit less esoteric, a
Mm-hmm.
lot less intimidating, which is why I started Firm for the Culture. Yeah.
Well, and you've done an amazing process, I think, of building the brand and the company, but also the workflow. It's so easy and straightforward
Mm-hmm.
to and you've done all the automation and the workflow processes of um, from the first call to getting kicked off and answering all the questions, and then having the initial search and talking about the search results. Like it's not something. I will say conversely, I did start a process with someone around patent,
Mm.
and it was much more broad. Like, here's a 5-page Word document. If you can just fill all this out, that would be great. And I think I put it off forever. Like, I just
Yeah.
I didn't have time, and I don't really know. But your sort of guided coach process has been great. And we worked through we thought we were going to be one thing, but now we're another thing. So,
Yeah.
which is fun.
I mean, and that's the importance of really understanding your ideal client avatar, right? Because when I started Firm for the Culture, I knew that I was going to really uh, have the privilege of supporting busy entrepreneurs, many of whom may have a ton of different uh, endeavors and passions and are super busy. So part of how I structured the workflow or the experience was, and this is like, I think, emblematic of this statement in the beginning, I wanted you to be able to look at and sign a contract from your phone. I wanted you to
Mm-hmm.
be able to book a call from your phone. I wanted you to be able to text me. I wanted you to be able to have a level of access that traditional law firms kind of put their noses up at, because um, I knew that you were doing TED Talks and founders were on Good Morning America, or founders were coming up with ideas that, they may have forgotten if they didn't write down immediately. So our workflows and our automations, sometimes it can go a little overboard. Like, you might get like 15 different reminders for like the same event. But it's trial and error. And I think because our automations are so streamlined, or at least I work to make them really streamlined, our missed calls go down significantly. It takes people maybe 30 to 40 seconds to sign a contract. And they are oftentimes getting through the forms that we send them pretty proactively. And part of it is also, I didn't want to make our automations, for lack of a better term, so automated that people felt like they were being pushed through a simple automation. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why it was so important for me to also um, bring in FaceTime, bring in those moments where you were going to get the reminders for our meeting, but still have a meeting with you to have questions answered, to encourage you to say, hey, you can really answer these questions, or to say, hey, this might be a tough one. So, take some time to answer this, but let's also bookend the completing of this form, or the completion of this form, with another meeting, so I can have these check-ins with you, all for no additional cost. Because we
Mm-hmm.
also wanted to make sure that you didn't feel like checking in with us was going to make this process one that was significantly beyond your budget as well.
Right. Take me back to the early, like, so were you working in Silicon Valley and in trademark and IP, and when did you have that? Do you remember the time in the period when you had that sort of feeling and you started to like explore what it would look like to be on your own? What did that sort of period look like?
It was a period where I really felt like I was going crazy and destroying my career.
Because you were trying to do both, or like what
Oh,
was
no, no,
the?
no. Not trying to do both.
Oh,
Ethically, I didn't want to like kind of get the censure, the sanctioning, sanctioning meaning like, hit on the hands, not sanctioning meaning
hmm,
allowing. I didn't want to get censured or ridiculed by my bosses and powers that be because as a law firm, what like we weren't really allowed to do legal side hustles. So
right.
it wasn't a matter of like, can I do this on the side? It was a matter of like, I need to quit my job if I'm going to be providing services to others. So that
Wow.
was a real, yeah. So that was a real tough decision. But going even back further, it was around, I would say, August or July of 2019. So every year, the law firm that I was a part of, it sounds very fancy and very posh. The head of the law firm, he's an avid hiker. So he brings a bunch of us on a trip, all expenses paid, to a part of the world where we hike. So
Wow.
through those opportunities, I've been to Japan, I've been to Greece, I've been to Switzerland. And it's been an amazing journey. So the last trip to Switzerland, uh, I decided, okay, I'm going to make this a little bit of a Euro trip. So I'm going to go to Prague and then I'm going to go to um, the UK because I have some family in London. And I had, done all my work in advance. I had uh, told everyone I was going to be out of the office. I had, you know, uh, delegated all my work properly, but um, my colleagues didn't necessarily care about that. And I
Like
remember
they thought you should have been doing more,
they
even
thought,
though you were
yeah, they
ahead.
thought I should have been doing more work. I think it was real. And I get it. Like we work in big law, like the hours are known to be brutal, but I think it felt like there wasn't even any regard of my away message. Like they would email me, they would get my away message. They're like, yeah, whatever. I need this by like XYZ.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I need this by XYZ. And with that, there was but so much that I can do. So, while I did get a chance to travel, my travels from my memory are really just it, re- it's just encapsulated by me going to cafes and little shops, burrowing myself in a corner and trying to figure out the Wi-Fi in order to get work done for like 8 or 10 hours per day. So I didn't really get to have that
Right.
vacation.
The full
Yeah, I
experience.
didn't really get to rest. I didn't really get to rest. And then on top of that, considering that I was in Europe and a lot of our meetings were in Pacific Standard Time, I was getting up at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to have meetings that were, being run in the afternoon in Silicon Valley. So it was definitely um, during my like fifth or sixth hour of like the fifth day that I was traveling and looking for places to work, I started to ask myself, like, why am I doing this? Like, what is this for? Um, am I truly engaging the work that I went to law school um, to, to work on? Am I making impact? When I first went to law school, I wanted to work more so on like civil rights work, constitutional law. Those were my favorite types of subject matters as far as it came in to the law. But as I grew older and really became enamored with intellectual property, I wanted to figure out a way to kind of intersect both because oftentimes, in my experience, when we're talking about like social justice or accessibility and the law, we're not thinking about IP. We're thinking about domestic violence, or we're thinking about civil rights litigation or social justice or criminal law, which is all great. But what happens when you don't want to just survive, but you want to thrive? You want to dream. You want to pass along the fruits of your labor to your family, who is in the room having those conversations with you. So I started to think of that. So when I got back from Europe, I was just angry at everybody and I was tired.
Yeah, I imagine.
And like out of rebellion, I just took like a mental health day and I was just like, I'm going to go watch. At the time, I think it was like what I call the National Geographic version of The Lion King. It was out. You know that version? It's just like so creepy. I was like, I just want the cartoons. I don't need the National Geographic version. So I just went to watch it. But around that time, I was still very fatigued, still very like, at the same time restless, still very tired. And one of the ways that I would, one of the things that would help with my anxiety when I was living in the Silicon Valley was getting up and riding my bike at like the wee hours of the morning. Because the Silicon Valley, there's a lot of campuses, like people, like there's a lot of space, there's a lot of land. So here I am just riding my bike at like 4 o'clock in the morning, just like through the campuses and through these like big tech companies. And then I just hear like, I'm a God girl. So a lot of how I navigate life is through my faith. But I just heard a still small voice just saying, you can go now. It's time to go.
Nice.
And I felt calm. Now, however, then I started to feel very panicky because I didn't know go where. Like, do I go?
Yeah.
Do I go to another job?
You will start the journey now.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Exactly.
And which direction do I go?
Exactly. Do I go to another law firm? Do I work for the government? Do I, go in-house? Like I didn't know. And at the time, at no point was I considering entrepreneurship. At no point. So I was just feeling like I was going crazy. I was like, I don't know what I'm about to do. And I really do feel like I'm destroying my career because I'm a fifth year at this point. I'm like, on the partner track. I'm like, if I just like if I keep quiet and just keep my nose to the grindstone, I could really make something of myself. So this idea that I was like challenging this traditional way of how things were done, it drove me semi-crazy. It did.
I imagine also you mentioned being first in your family and, and then going to Berkeley and then being on the partner track and sort of being Silicon Valley. You're at what is supposed to feel like just arm's reach from partner, at a firm, which there's always this feeling that right around that corner, it's just so cushy, right? Like there's just everything is just given to you or whatever. But interesting to hit that place where you sort of realize all that you were doing when you were on your trip for someone else, there's a good chance that you would make partner and that would not change and that would be the same.
Exactly. Like I knew that I was just signing up to just do more work, even above and beyond the work and the tiring work that I was doing. And again, it wasn't necessarily the subject matter because again, I'm still in IP. It was just the sheer amount and the disregard for boundaries and rest. Like it was, right. It was like, you would be honored if you were working 70, 80 weeks and people would look at you like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with your life? If you're working anything less than that. And it wasn't frankly, it wasn't sustainable. It just wasn't sustainable. I had no life. I felt very lonely. I would get up super early, go into the office because this was before COVID. So this was before, work from home was like really a thing. Get up, go into the office at like 7 o'clock in the morning, be there until about 8 p.m., come home and still do work. And that was my existence for years.
Right.
And it it was a very lonely journey and a very and this is one of the reasons why, you know, alcoholism and suicide rates are so high amongst attorneys, because we are very isolated, and as a result we have no real choice but to really mesh our identities with the quality of our work product.
Right. And I feel like a lot of times that stress and anxiety comes from feeling trapped and that you can't do anything about it. And I imagine, you know, for so many people, um, that, you know, also financially and family and others being trapped, you know, almost physically by not being able to just make a decision to go do something. And then also the job that you're at is so demanding, and people are sort of assuming this extraordinarily high bar that doesn't take into account your mental and physical and health, and you know, and that you look around and you're like, well, I can't really do anything about this. To your point, I think leads to that depression and substance abuse, because you just want sort of some sort of mental escape that allows you to, I don't know, to kind of feel like you've got a little control of your life on something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can imagine that was a rough period, especially coming, you know, like you said, with your journey and getting to the place where you feel like you're at the what would be the 10-yard line, but then realizing that there's not actually anything like right around that corner that's going to make you feel better.
Yeah. I mean, they call it golden handcuffs for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And I love that you actually brought that up, because although I wasn't able to, you know, work in big law and do the side hustle at the same time, I was privileged. You know, as a result of having had my federal clerkship, I got a really cushy sign-on bonus with the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And and as a result, I was able to work with my financial advisor to kind of, you know, really think through a working budget as I went on like my eat, pray, love journey, so to speak.
Right.
Right. So that was definitely something that I was really grateful for. I wasn't starting from ground zero. And I remember, you know, as I was getting through my panic, I was, you know, praying a lot, journaling a lot, listening to a lot of great sermons, but also I was also really upping the number of times I went to my therapist. I
Mm.
was really upping, you know, the reach outs to my village, to my community. I was also seeking out other folks who went from big law to start their own thing. So it was, and I also invested in a career coach. So there was a village, so to speak, around me to kind of help me think through how I was engaging this journey, and also making sure I didn't burn bridges on the way out,
Right.
right? Because I might come back. I
Yeah,
might
totally.
just come back. Yeah.
I love that process of, I always think of the easiest way I've been able to ever describe it. That sort of, there is um, there's a distortion field when you're in work, or especially when you're in an environment like that. For me, I was at a big consulting firm, and you know, it's almost like you're just saturated with the Kool-Aid of how things are supposed to be. And you're almost surrounded in this matrix that have all these sort of rules about how it should be and how much you should be working. And don't you want to become a managing director? And like you know what I mean? Like everybody sort of is chasing the same thing. And what I love about your Eat, Pray, Love and getting out of that is, it doesn't have to be an immediate big shift. Like, you don't have to make a big decision to just quit your job. But what is important, I think, even if you're in it or not, is to get out of the matrix and get different perspectives from different places. And to your point about like praying and taking time by yourself in the early morning, and by having community discussions and more therapy discussions, you're getting yourself out of the matrix. And it's just like being in a bad, terrible relationship. And when you're in it, you really can't see all those sort of ways that you might be able to get out.
Yeah.
But then perspective and time, and then a year or two later, you're like, what? Why did I even think that that was okay? And so it's like finding these ways to give yourself perspective. Now, you may find when you're out there listening that you're in a place that you could probably push through or have better boundaries or whatever. And you may find ways to sort of adjust that, but at least you're getting out for a much more objective view than what I think is sometimes when you're just drinking Kool-Aid all day, every day, then it's really hard to have perspective on anything.
Absolutely. You have to, and obviously people don't have to do anything, but what's helpful and what helped me, frankly, just remain an attorney, because another alternative was just leaving the law altogether. But what helped me remain an attorney was, to your point, Kyle, having those different perspectives so I could see that there was more than one way to do law, right?
Right.
And even around that time, one of the books that I read was Becoming by Michelle Obama. And I really appreciate diverse stories because, and I remember talking to my career coach about this at the time. Michelle talked about how she wanted to quit being a lawyer, a practicing attorney, how she thought it was boring, how she thought it was morally questionable and all that great stuff. And what I love so much about her story is that I didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
I actually didn't feel that way. I loved the law. I loved doing the research. I loved digging into the case law. I loved doing the research, like all of that. And it was such an aha moment for me because I was able to kind of compare my story against the backdrop of another person who, by all intents and purposes, may have had a similar story to mine.
Right.
So it allowed me to say, okay, well, I don't think I hate the law. So are there other ways to do law? Maybe I don't like the way legal services are administered. So it allowed me space to appreciate the nuance instead of thinking that this was black and white. Right.
Right.
And while I was on that journey, I happened to come across a couple of attorneys who had their own law firm, were big on social media, were making the impact that they wanted to make. And it looked like they were truly their authentic self. And I said, I think I can do something like that. And that's what really started the journey to building Firm for the Culture.
Well, what was that turning point when you said, I'm out? I'm busting through the matrix and we're going to figure out if this thing works or not.
Yeah. So in big law, in many law firms, you have to engage a minimum number of billable hours per year. And, obviously that averages out to a certain amount of hours per month. And if you're not making those hours on a monthly basis, the powers that be are going to check in. So I was taking up my vacation time. I was taking up my sick leave. I was doing all the things to kind of explore what this journey was going to look like. I was literally moving out of the Silicon Valley. I was moving into a mentor's house. I'm renting like a room for like $800 a month. Like all of these were happening while I was still, quote unquote, technically on the payroll. Now, I wasn't practicing law. So let's be clear, ethics people. Right. I wasn't practicing law, but I was building the systems and I was starting to like really learn what it meant to build another law firm. And then like suddenly I got a couple of people checking in. They were like, hey, just checking in.
Yeah.
What's going on? And at that point I knew, okay, I need to make a decision. I need to start transitioning out before I like get fired, essentially. So they started checking in, I think, around the end of August, early September, or maybe even later than that, because I think I was like really, really under the radar, like really in a way that like impressed even me. So they might have started checking in around like early October. And the reason why is because at the time I did have a side hustle, but it wasn't a legal one. It was called the First Generation Purpose Project, which is my first business. Which is an initiative designed to help first-gen professionals navigate life and career by utilizing the grit and tenacity that's already on the inside of them. And my first client was Yale Law School. And the managing attorney of the office that I was working in went to Yale as
Nice.
so she kind of found out through the grapevine that this was
Right.
happening. And she was like, hey, like, why don't you speak about, our law firm there? And I was like, no, unless you
Yeah.
pay me. Like, I don't have to do
Don't
that.
don't cross the streams.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So she started like I think discerning that something else was going on. And then once the Yale thing took off, like I posted it on LinkedIn and went viral, then I got invited to speak at the United States Department of Commerce. And then I got invited to speak at all of these different places. So I started to get more confidence and think, oh, I can do this. I can like actually speak about things that are meaningful to me. I can share stories and I can also
Hmm.
obtain clients. So it was around also that time because some of my colleagues, followed me on LinkedIn that they were just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I think at that point, I could no longer keep it silent. And they were also proud. It wasn't a matter of like, you shouldn't be doing this. It was a matter of, like, we're going to announce it internally because we're proud of you, but also we're looking at your hours and they're also low. So, like, let's figure out how to reconcile these two things.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Let's help you. Let's mentor you. Obviously, you may not know what's like how to do this. And I was like, no,
That's
I know exactly how
amazing.
to do this. I'm like trying to get out.
Totally. Well,
So
that's
yeah.
amazing to also have a bit of that sort of soft landing and that journey. At least that it's not sort of come into my office, get the get the proverbial box, put your frames and your flower pot in it. That it was a bit of a process, which is great, and that you got that kind of like the first project being the training ground, like you said, of being able to how I get on social and how I sort of speak to people about and how I start to gain clients and things like that. That I imagine that getting to that where you have a day where you're like, if I just apply law to this same process, then I can see where things are headed.
Absolutely. Like, I know for a fact that Firm for the Culture, with all of its systems and thingamajigs and all of the text message confirmations, that text message probably for me is probably a reminder or something. Like, like with all of those things, none of that would have existed, or I would not have been so obsessed with systems had I not had my first business. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with First Generation Purpose Project, it took off so quickly, and I didn't even have an invoice system. I didn't even have,
So great.
right? I didn't even have an
Yeah.
invoicing system. I didn't even
I can
have,
see that, by the way. Like, you open up Word and you're like, is there an invoice template in
yeah,
here?
like you're asking that little paperclip person. It's like,
Yeah,
hey, paperclip
Clippy.
person,
Clippy,
um,
can you make an invoice
yeah, can
for
you
me?
help me make an invoice? Like it was trash. Like I didn't even know how to like really work PayPal. I didn't know how to make like a Square
That's so
link.
great.
Like none of these things were in existence. And
Right.
so when I spoke from the stage and shared my story, I didn't know how to collect leads. I didn't know about the importance of collecting leads. Like I knew none of that. None of
Hmm.
that. So I didn't really know how to make a sustainable business. And then on top of that, although I was an IP litigator, it's very different from what I do now as an IP prosecutor. An IP prosecutor
Right.
is where I prosecute legal matters on behalf of our clients at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which is a very different governmental tribunal than the courts of like law, litigation,
Mm.
so to speak. So I was very ignorant to the process of actually applying for a trademark or applying for a copyright or arguing on behalf of clients before the USPTO. So when I applied for my own trademark, I got rejected twice. I got the toughest rejections. Now,
Oh, wow.
fortunately, I dug in and because I was terrified and I was just like, by that point, I had already been to Yale. I had already been recognized. I'd already been in news, like in news outlets. So like the idea of having to re-educate my community now with a new brand name was very
Right.
daunting to me. So I was able to ultimately get the registration for First Generation Purpose Project. But I remember thinking, I need to do business better. And I also want to take my experience and teach other people how to do business better. And this is why when we first launched Firm for the Culture, we said we're social entrepreneurs helping social entrepreneurs. Like
Yeah, I love that.
we're impact makers helping you not go through the journey that almost stymied our own impact. Yeah.
Well, and I love the fact that your brand is whatever the opposite, your brand, and also how, as a client, I've interacted with you is what is like 1% legal. Like how people think about sort of the legal process and and interacting with lawyers and sort of the all of the things that go with that. This it doesn't feel like a legal process. It feels like working on a project, a social brand project.
Yeah. And that's the biggest compliment ever. That's the biggest compliment ever because a couple of reasons. The first one is it's because of how I show up in a non-legal, non-esoteric, accessible way. That was actually the reason why I wanted to quit being an attorney. Because although I've been privileged to navigate pretty elite spaces, I never really felt like an attorney in the traditional sense. Like I was never the person that was like crossing my arms with like the justice symbols in the background with the gavel and, you know, saying, we're going to fight for you. Like I was just like never that person.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't that person, and because I also am like utilitarian in a sense of I'm not just exploring the law just because it's something I'm like really interested in. I'm exploring the law in relation to some sort of social justice or impact initiative. It's like, I want to figure out how to get clients like Kyle more trademark protection. That's why I'm doing this research, not because, oh, I'm just very interested in trademarks in general. Like that was never my thing. So when I would run into people who were more academic with the law, so to speak, which was a lot of people at a place like Berkeley, I would oftentimes think I don't belong here. Like this is like, I don't belong in this space. And the second reason why I say this is a compliment is because when I first started Firm for the Culture and spoke to website designers and people to help me build my proposals, they oftentimes wanted to make the website the gavels and the symbols of justice and all that stuff. And I was just like, I absolutely don't want anything around any of that. Like, I don't want even a gavel.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's such a good decision. Too many people are like, I'm in the medical profession, so I'm going to find people who are experienced in building medical websites. And all we do is just compare all the other medical websites and try and make it just slightly better than the next medical website right next to you.
And it didn't differentiate. And I knew I had to make a decision earlier because of the way California laws are. California laws, when it comes to licensing, at least at being a licensed attorney, it's the hardest bar to pass, but it's one of the easiest bar licenses to lose because of its crazy ethical rules. So one rule, so to speak, is I can't have like a DBA, so to speak, of my law firm. It either has to be a very like the name that I attach to my law firm has to be the only name. So unlike other states where they can say the law offices of Kyle Hudson, the law offices of Rukayatu Tijani, it either had to be the law offices of XYZ or Firm for the Culture. Like it couldn't be both. So that was like, I had to commit.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling crazy. Again, this whole journey. And if nothing else, if the listeners take nothing else from this, I hope that they understand that feeling crazy is not a rebuke of your purpose. Feeling like you're absolutely losing your mind doesn't mean that you need to stop. It more likely means this is an amazing idea. No one has ever really done it, and it's really cool to kind of work through that. So get the village around you so you can work through those thoughts. Because you're going to feel crazy.
And in those moments, though, when you feel like you're crazy, and I can totally sympathize with this because I've talked to so many people now who sort of want to put what we're building in like a real nice, neat box that is very similar to something that's already been built. I'm like, no, don't do that. Get me out of this box. I don't want to be in this box. Is I imagine that you still, even if you felt crazy or it was stressful or whatever, that you still had this sort of quiet resolution of this feeling that like you were headed down the right path, even if it's like a difficult path or like that. Did you ever feel like I'm I'm really unsure and I feel lost, but I'm just going to keep going? Or did you still feel like you had that quiet voice of like, no, it's difficult. I'm not sure if this is the right thing, but there's something underlying, which is just like, no, just keep going. This is right.
It was definitely the latter. It was definitely some like existential reassurance of the fact that I was going down the right path. I had one potential client I was speaking with before I launched Firm for the Culture. And I remember just like, again, it was one of those days when I was feeling crazy. And she said to me, write down what you believe God told you in the moment that you made the decision to start this journey. Like just write it
Mm-hmm.
down, write down what you were eating, write down how you felt, write down what God said, write down, the steps that you took, write that down. So in the moments where you feel like none of this makes sense, I don't feel like I have, like I don't feel like I have a foundation to stand on. Go back to that journal entry and just read it and reread it and reread
Right.
it to just remind yourself that you know what God's voice sounds like. You know what reassurance feels like. You know that at the time you heard this small voice, your heart rate slowed down. You got calmer. You
Yep.
make sure you reiterate that to yourself so that in these moments where it feels crazy, you can continue trusting yourself.
I luckily was able to capture mine.
Oh,
Um,
yay. So
I
you had
did.
a moment like that as well.
So I had a moment, and let me see if I can,
I
if
wish
it
I
lets me
recorded
do.
myself. I got to look back to see if I like vlogged or anything, but
It's so interesting doing it on something like Instagram, where
oh
like I obviously have
wow.
the time and the day and all that sort of stuff. So I had just gotten off of a call, and I've spent a while sort of refining how I talk about it and how I talk about stack lists and the journey, what it is, and was there was something on that call that I felt so confident post pitch. I think I'd met with an investor and I did the demo, and it was a 15-minute call, and I did the demo in 6 minutes and I did the deck in 6 minutes, and I had 2 minutes left over, and the investor had no questions. And I was like, sounds great. It was good meeting you. And like, it was so on point that after I got done, like my hand was
Handshaking.
just like, I just, and the hairs on the back of my neck, like I just felt like, oh my gosh, and it was one of those things where it was a good physical manifestation
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like, I have zero questions about if this is like the path that I'm supposed to be on. Um, this is it. Like, this is the thing, and I'm on this journey, and I'm not like, I don't know, I don't wake up every day going, I don't know, like maybe I should find something else. Like, it doesn't. It's just clear resolution, like to the bone, which is
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah, and I'm sure like you Kyle, like you've probably sought out people who were successful in a somewhat similar endeavor, right? And part of and I think like you, and this is why I appreciate clients like you, like we weren't just like, riding off the seat of our pants. Like we were really like there was some, empirical evidence backing up. so
Right.
so I did market research before I even launched Firm
Mm-hmm.
for the Culture. And one of the main reasons why I decided to focus on social impact founders and entrepreneurs was because initially, and as much as I love identifying as a first gen everything, they weren't my ideal client avatar from my interviews that I did with people. Like if I'm doing interviews with people and they're like, I absolutely would not pay that much for your services, then you probably aren't my avatar.
Yep.
Like, and
Totally. You're right.
also a lot of social impact orgs at the time, social impact was like a huge thing. Brainwashing was also a huge thing. But in the Silicon Valley, a bunch of um, entrepreneurs were really trying to figure out how to balance profit and purpose. There was
Mm.
also a Stanford innovation article around how lucrative social impact work was becoming in the tech space. There was also a Deloitte study that said that more millennials and Gen Zs are actually leaving large corporate spaces in order to either start their own thing or go for another position that truly incorporates social impact work. So I just knew that like there was actual evidence to back up
Right.
the journey that I was taking myself on. Uh, so it wasn't just a matter of, oh, I'm just going to kind of feel it out. Yes, trusting myself in this process was important, but also having the hard, concrete evidence, and also paying for coaching. That was
Right.
something that, like, I did not want to try to figure this out by myself. That was like not a thing for me. Like, I was willing to pay, I think at the time, like upwards of like 20K or something for coaching. It was
Mm-hmm.
expensive. It was
Right.
not, but I was committed. Like I
Yeah.
had to make this work. At the very least, I had to
Totally.
get my money back, right? Like
Yeah.
even if I,
No, I
yeah,
big advocate of coaching, and it's one that I'm actually working with Andrew Chen for
mm,
of Uber. He did Uber growth in San Fran when under Travis and wrote the cold start problem, and I feel like coaching is such a hack when you find the right person that on our second call, we're talking about investing, and he's like, no, 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 here's what you need to do. And here's how it does. And here's how, like, and so you get a partner at A16 being like, here's how things need to go, and here's how you should approach this. All of a sudden, you're like, yeah, like, now I know how to, and you have so much more confidence that you're not just sort of like rattling around these things in your head. And then when you go to meet with someone, who you're asking for money for, you're not coming from a position of like, okay, I promise we're going to do great, I'm going to try hard or whatever. That you've got outside evidence from other people, is huge.
not only do you have outside evidence, you also have those relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the Silicon Valley, I would say more than, or venture capital, more than a lot of other industries, your relationships truly matter. Those warm intros are
Right.
like everything. That can be the difference
Yeah.
between a really successful Series A and shutting the doors and selling your business for
Totally.
parts. So it's really, I'm glad that um, I'm glad that you also see the value of coaching, and that also speaks to my ideal client avatar, people who see the value of investing in their business so
Mm-hmm.
that this is a endeavor, because trademarks, the process is 2 years long. Copyright is
Right.
about 8 months long. So they see this as, oh, this is an investment into my business, as opposed to, oh, this is just a huge cost center.
Right. So what's next down the line for, like, where do you want to take Firm to the Culture?
Well, I'm celebrating my 5th year in full-time entrepreneurship.
Amazing. I do virtual high fives.
There you go. Right back at you. So November 9th, 2024 will be my 5th full year as an entrepreneur. And that is
Nice.
crazy. And I do want to, I was thinking about like just growing my team more. And I do think that that is definitely a endeavor that's worthwhile. But I also want to kind of make our services a lot more holistic and robust for our clients. So a lot of our clients are doing TED Talks, are
Mm.
going on like, when you speak, when you shout from the rooftops, your social impact, you're sure to get noticed. A lot of our clients are getting book deals. A lot of our clients are, one of our clients, their story is being made into a movie. So I want to be able to really expand our offerings to grow with our clients as they continue in their social impact endeavors. So one of the ways that I've realized to do that is not simply just following our client's journey, which is definitely part of how we do this, but also finding different ways to remain in constant communication with our clients, which is why I say I don't want our clients to feel like they're being pushed through an automation, right? So one way that we are really exploring, actually, there's two ways. One way is co-working sessions. So a lot of our clients start off as solopreneurs, and being a solopreneur is lonely. So to be able to, spend 1 or 2 hours a week with like 13 or 14 other founders just to get work done is a game changer. So really exploring that is going to be part of our business model. And then also, because at this point we've been able to serve over 300 clients, a lot of you guys would really, really just take off if we were to find some creative way beyond simply sending an email to have you connect and interact with each other. So another thing that we're going to do is connection lunches, where we buy both of you or 4 of you or 8 of you lunch through DoorDash gift cards, bring you into Zoom and have you connect with each other in a way that's really meaningful. So, and those are ways that we can continue providing value to our clients, even beyond intellectual property work. And then it's in those discussions that oftentimes our clients will say, oh, I have this other thing that I'm working on. I need to set up a call with you. And you already know the way my automations are set up. I'll be like, great, here, we're going to send you like 15 reminders to set up a call with us. And that's how we get you back into our ecosystem. But totally. We want to be able to be on your journey, even beyond intellectual property protection, because IP is not necessarily, and I say this to our clients, IP is not necessarily the be all and end all. It is a really powerful means to help you achieve the impact that you want to make.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. I could also see either Slack or Discord groups.
Yep. That was another thing. The thing about that is I want to make sure that by the time we do that, we have a really robust and dedicated community manager. Because I don't want, because I've been a part of Slack and Discord groups that have just like gone like pretty much silent because people are not keeping them consistent. So it's like, I don't want to start that if we don't have the means to keep it going.
I've got some ideas for you. We can chat about that.
Oh, sounds good.
I think that like, but I agree. It's one that there are groups started up all the time, but if you go in there and it's kind of quiet. And then, of course, if you post one thing and nobody sort of responds back, then you're out. But it is an interesting way to be able to. I've had a couple. I think even Mercury had one where I've met people, and then I've met them in real life, and I've gotten on their newsletter, and like and making connections like that. Especially if there are people in the same sort of space, could be interesting from a connection perspective.
Absolutely, our goal overall is to really create a community of just like-minded and dynamic social impact and thought leader founders, so that they can connect with and be on each other's podcast or go to each other's conferences or seminars, because we have had the privilege of working with and supporting the intellectual property processes of some of the biggest social impact and founders and thought leaders in our generation. And I know that simply connecting you all will make for more impact, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to follow along in the Firm for the Culture journey and your journey.
Because
it definitely, it sounds like you've found a good way to listen and to sort of pivot when needed, and you're building such an amazing ecosystem, I think was the word you used, which I love, which is great. And thank you for spending time and coming to tell all the stories. I love them.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, amazing. Good seeing you.
You too.